No checklist completed is going to save you. No bucket list is going to save you. No amount of blood, sweat, and tears that you've poured out in your life is going to save you. No amount of cash or worldly possessions is going to save you. You can't take it with you. You'll be dead. Buddha can't save you. Gandhi can't enlighten you. The Pope can't absolve your sins. The saints can't pray you into eternal life. Muhammad can't fix you. Allah isn't able. No president, no legislation, no Supreme Court justice, no state or nation or leader or celebrity. No one can save you because there is salvation in no one else.
That's right, everybody. There is salvation in nobody but Jesus. So that's that. Hey, we're back. The Bearded Bible Thinker podcast. Today I want to talk about your kids. Ha ha ha. Okay, that sounded a little creepier than I hoped it would. So this is not going to be a creeper episode, okay? I want to talk about something that I mentioned in sermon recently, that my most recent sermon actually on August 6th, talked just briefly in that sermon about kids, about children being a part of the church. And what I actually referenced is this thing that I hear often from parents and adults in the church world, teachers, those kinds of things. Sometimes we look at we say this about America too, right? Like kids are the future of America, or kids are the future of the church, and so we need to pour into them and da 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 da, right? And I think that one of the things that we miss when we say that, I actually hate that phrase, which I said from up front that the other day. But one of the things that we miss is that they're all like, their hearts are beating. They're actually here already. They're a part of us as it stands. And so this idea that they're the future of the church isn't completely wrong, but they're also part of the present of the church. And I think that we kind of miss that if we're not careful, that they actually are part of the now of the church. They're part of the church now. If your child has made a profession of faith, and so you're convinced, you see their life and there are some obvious fruits of the Spirit a little bit that are manifesting. Now, manifesting in the proper degree for a child, of course. You're not going to have a kid who's seems like a mature Christian all of a sudden. That's not how it works. So if that's what you're waiting on, they're never going to be there, and probably you should look in the mirror because you're not there either, right? So, but kids that have made that profession of faith, they actually are part of the church, and we should treat them as such. So I just want to talk about that in a couple of different ways today. First of all, we recently made some changes, and without getting into tons of detail, because it's irrelevant for this podcast, but the short version is that we no longer do children's church during Sunday morning worship. Now, I understand the reasoning for having a children's church kind of thing, and I don't completely disagree with those reasonings. And this wasn't just a Rob decision. We don't do that here unless it's some kind of clerical thing that I just need to decide on. The elders talked about this. We had input from some of the parents who taught. And so anyway, this is something that this is just kind of where we landed. Okay. So I'm not going to condemn any churches who have children's church ministries. They're not all bad. And I see even a biblical warrant in a sense for that. At least let me say it this way. I understand the biblical case that's made for that. One of the practical things that we think about when we think about children's church is that parents will be able to sit in the worship setting and actually pay attention and take it in, and be a part of it, and not be distracted, and those kinds of things. And so it's looked at in a lot of cases as a service to the parents as much as it's a service to children, and which I get, and I sympathize with that. I think that, I mean, I understand that we were there once. I have, by the time this comes out, probably a 12-year-old and a 14-year-old. Right at the moment, I have an 11-year-old and a 14-year-old. So we're kind of past the children's church stage in life, but I mean, I do sympathize with the parents that have to sort of war with baby, toddler kind of things. We have an infant nursery, but with those young kids who are like 5, and I mean, in this world, it's tough because the attention span is ever decreasing among us, right? So I get the struggle at times and the frustration at times, but one of the things that we talk about, that we talked about is what would actually be the most helpful in the long term, right? And in children's church, first of all, you have to have you have to think about curriculum. Right? Curriculum for children's church, by and large, the things that you can just go by are dumb. Just to be blunt, by and large, the things that you're going to run into out there are really shallow. They're not really learning anything. They might be learning basic, really basic things like Jesus loves you or God is good or whatever. But they're not actually going to learn tenets of the faith. They're not actually being entrenched in things that are really solid biblical things. It's all really very surfacey, right? And I think that first of all, one of the pushbacks against that is someone might say, well, yeah, they're 5, right? But up until just very recently in human history, 5-year-olds and 4-year-olds were already learning catechism. We're learning deep spiritual truths, biblical truths, through memorization. Of course, they're not going to understand it all yet. They don't understand how to wipe their booties all the time. So this is something that that we really just have to think through, right? When we think about curriculum, I think that we tend to think that kids are dumber than they actually are. There are toddlers that sit in the service, and they'll be repeating things from time to time from the sermon that they were like coloring through or something. But like mom and dad will say to me later, yeah, we got home and I didn't even think they were paying attention, but they said this, and it's something that I said, or something or they were singing one of the songs from worship or something like that. So like, they're not dumb. They catch on to these things. This is why when you hear a little kid say a curse word, the parents are immediately like, it wasn't me. It's because they pick things up, right? They actually do hear. They actually do pay attention. They're actually taking in all of this information. And in fact, at that age, if you're into classical learning or you know anything about that, at young ages, at the youngest of ages, memorization is the way that they learn. And then they learn later on in life, in their childhood, to make sense of those things that they've memorized. But God made their brains to pick up on things, to memorize things. And so that's one reason that I think it's important that if you're going to do a children's church, it should be robust. It should be something that actually has meat in it. Even if they don't understand all the things or understand all of the scriptures, and you don't spend 30 minutes unpacking it for them, however that might look, it needs to be something substantial. It can't just be Jesus is my Valentine, right? Because that's not even biblical, first of all. But it's got to be heavier than that. It's got to be something that they can grasp, digest, and be able to spit out, right, at some point, even if they're lacking in complete understanding of it. And so I think that's one of the reasons that there are a few curriculums that are really good. I think the Sunday school curriculum that we're using is really good. It's from Answers in Genesis, so it's trustworthy and helpful, and it's been good for kids. But so the other thing is, just on a practical level, um, we have children in the worship service now, in our worship gathering now, and it's been a blessing. I know that when I remember when you're a parent and you have a young toddler or baby, and they just all of a sudden get upset and start going nuts. There is nothing more frustrating or embarrassing on the planet. I get it. I remember we didn't eat out for like a few years because of this, right? When you're in a public setting, particularly like, you're in the library or something, this is kind of what it feels like when you're in the sanctuary of a local church, and it's quiet. Everyone is listening to the sermon or whatever, and all of a sudden your youngster screeches and starts freaking out. Like I understand the embarrassment and the struggle of that as a parent, but a couple of things are really helpful about that. One, it does test you as a parent, and that's a good thing. Two, it tests those around you, and how judgmental are they, right? How much have they maybe forgotten that struggle that you're in the middle of right now? If they never see a struggling parent because the kids are always somewhere else, they're going to be remain out of touch with that reality, if they are out of touch with that reality. And this is something that can actually serve to pull people back in and sympathize with young parents and want to come alongside them more and be reminded that there's a need there. It can also, I think that it's also been a huge joy, just in our particular church body, to hear the cries of those young people, and it's been a wonderful thing to hear that and see that, and so I think that it's so at that level it's a good thing to hear the young life among us, and I did for the first time the other week. I attempted to address the children directly a couple of different times during my sermon. I'm going to continue to do that. I want them to feel like they are part of our church, because they are. I want the parents to feel like they're a part of our church, because they are. And so I'm going to attempt to continue to do that. It's not something that has been in my wheelhouse. I'm typically just fired up and not thinking about it at that level, but hopefully I'll be able to get better at that and improve at that. That's one of the things that is a goal of mine as a preacher, is to be able to preach to all of the kinds of people, all of the people from all walks and ages and stages of life. And so it's easiest to communicate as a preacher to people my age at any given time. And so that's what's more natural. People my age are struggling with things like, do I go to the football game, or do I show my children that church is a priority, right? So those are the kinds of things that I'm more naturally bent toward when it comes to preaching. So I have to, when it comes to like grandparents and children, and even teenagers, like I have to think about those things to try and include that. But so hopefully that will be a blessing to parents and children, both. And but anyway, we are obviously we've moved to a kind of a different way of doing things at the moment, and certainly not opposed to children's church. Necessarily. It seems like the best fit for us at this time, and I think that there's a solid biblical case for it. I think that if I'm a parent, I would rather go through the little bit of embarrassment when my 3-year-old is acting like a 3-year-old than the more embarrassing situation when like my 8-year-old is acting like a 3-year-old because they've never been in church, right? Because they've always had a time during church that's focused on them and their age and their visual and fun and colors and all the things, right? If they've never been part of the church at large and they've always been out in the back doing their own thing, then when it comes time for them to join the church body in the sanctuary for worship, it's like, yeah, this already is no fun. Like, I don't even want to be here. That's what they learned. And so I think there's that case to be made. So there are lots of reasons I could talk about as to why we have done that and gone to that, that are close to the things I've already mentioned. But so what I want to talk about just really briefly is something that I think could help. So some of you already do this with like homeschool and different things like that. But if you work intentionally to increase your youngsters' attention span, excuse me, and this is actually helpful probably for increasing adult attention span as well, right? The quick idea is shut the screens off and read them a book. If even a children's book, doesn't matter. I heard this a few days ago, actually, on a podcast I was listening to about this kind of thing, and it was brought up that actually does a good job in preparing them. It makes it not so weird and foreign when they're forced to sit and listen to somebody talk and preach out of and about the Bible for 40 minutes. If they've already become a little more used to a parent reading to them for 20 minutes or 30 minutes or something like that, and they've grown accustomed to that, then it becomes a lot less of a stretch for them to sit in a church worship setting for a while and do that. So that really just comes down to putting away the things that that have caused over the course of a past generation or so, that have caused our attention span to just dwindle to almost nothing. So putting those things away and then grabbing and latching onto a few things and being intentional in a few ways that might actually help increase your child's ability to focus for longer on something like that. So that's one thing that you can do as a parent that I think may be helpful, and it might not be, but it makes sense. So hopefully that'll be a help to somebody. But I think the main message that we want to get across is that, look, not only are your children welcome here, but we want them here. Not only are your children allowed to be in the sanctuary, but we long for them to be in the sanctuary and to see and watch mom and dad worship God, and how important that is to them, to witness their parents worshiping Christ with other believers, even at the youngest age. That leaves an impression, family. It just does. It's important. And I hope that we can continue to do that and to keep on that track. And I hope that if there are ways that we can improve that for parents and make that easier as a transition or something like that, then I hope that we can do that. That will be. I know that we're open to suggestions and things like that, and I'm going to attempt. I'm going to attempt to be more intentional regularly about actually addressing children at times in the sermons to include them, and help them understand that they're actually important, that they're actually part of this. Um, and so this there are lots and lots and lots of scriptures um, that that talk about children, and uh, 3 John 1:4. Now, despite what he might mean as children here, it is applicable when he says, "I have no greater joy than to hear that my children are walking in the truth." And I think that that should be our most obvious goal. A young mother said in Sunday school not long ago that confessed actually she was feeling sort of prideful about they've been doing catechism with their youngsters at home as part of their worship and learning those things, and she felt kind of some pride rearing up, like, yeah, when the youngster was actually memorizing and reciting some things or whatever. And then she got checked in her spirit. God kind of poked at her or whatever, and she said, like, why am I prideful about this? And the phrase that she used, I think, is really good. So why am I prideful about this? Catechizing my children should be as normal as potty training them, and that is profound and true. If your kids grow up getting to just believe what they want, and they have to live a certain way under your roof, but we need to be teaching them. Deuteronomy 6:7, talking about the laws of the Lord, the ways of God. It says, "You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise." This is an obvious way that he's saying at all times they should be learning Christ and him crucified. At all times they should be learning what it means to live the Christian life. They should be learning at all times what it means to not only do mom and dad know the truth, but mom and dad live a certain way because they know the truth. They live the truth. They should be seeing that. They should be hearing that from you. They should be led into that by you. And so our goal as a church, I think right now, when it comes to children, is we believe that they are part of the church family. We believe that they are even at young ages, they are people who have gifts, people who have passions and talents. Now, certainly, the younger a person is, the more out of control and nuts those kind of passions and talents can be. So, of course, this is guided, right? But they have things to offer the church, and it's important at a young age that they understand the idea of serving the church in some way. My my oldest son has been coming to men's Bible study pretty much since he was 12, and he's 14 now. He's been coming to men's Bible study, and that's been really good for him. He sits there and he's quiet most of the time, and he's around men talking through passages in the Bible, and he's learned a ton, and I'm super proud of him, and I love seeing him grow like that. And now he might not like this a lot, but his little brother is about to turn 12, and so it's going to be just within the next week or two that we're going to all three be men who are in men's Bible study, learning the scriptures together and talking about the scriptures together. And so those are the kinds of things, family, that we need to think about, that you need to think about. God has called, he's given you those children. If you have children, he's given them to you on purpose, right? It's no accident that you have them. And so living in that, right? That being your first ministry. We all say that, but is it really, right? Um, and so it's just something to think about, when we have I think 5 pregnancies right now in our church, and which is significant. Our church is about a church of about 150 people, and so 5 pregnancies is like, you're certainly adding family members there, right? Um, and so this is something that is really relevant for us. We're going to be interrupted with cries, and I think that that's beautiful. It's a beautiful distraction, and my hope is that that whenever parents have to take their children out and they are feeling embarrassed, that after church, what I want from you, family, if that wasn't you, then after church, I want you to go up to those families, those dads or moms or whoever it might have been, that whose ever turn it might have been, right? Go up to them and say, "Hey, thanks for bringing them into church. Thanks for doing what you do," and encourage them. Take time to encourage them and say, "Look, there was one time." I'll say this and then I'll finish this up, because it's about time to finish this podcast anyway. But there was one time when one of our boys was really young, and young enough to get in trouble, old enough to know they shouldn't have done it, right? And so it was right during church. I wasn't a paid pastor yet. I was sitting up toward the front of the church, and with my family, and a boy was acting up, right, and just started causing a ruckus. And so I just grabbed him sternly by his arm, and he knew what was coming. And I walked him straight down the middle aisle with him screaming the whole way. And I took him out and fixed the situation. And afterward, I can't tell you the impact that it had on me. That afterward there were a 2 or 3 people, I don't remember exactly, but it was multiple people that came up to me more in a kind of a private setting, and encouraged me and said, "Good job, Dad. Um, Keep it up." They were happy to see someone that had their kids in the church. That they were happy to see someone who didn't just let their kids run over them and run the show, but that like I felt it was important that they learn young how they are to be in that setting, that we're here to worship God, not you. And it's important that you realize that. In fact, isn't that the message that all of us need to be hearing repeatedly throughout our entire lives? No, listen, we're here to worship God, not you, right? So if you're upset with this particular thing that's going on, or this particular thing isn't serving you well, or I really liked it when, or those kinds of things, listen, we're here to worship God, not you, right? It's the same thing that we need to teach our children. And so I hope that as a church body that we serve one another well during this transition, and I think that we have been so far. I hope that we serve one another well through this transition, and that your children feel loved and important in our church family, and that you feel that we feel that your children are loved and important in our church family. So I don't know if this was even helpful or if it was just me rambling, but I hope that it was helpful in some way, that it blessed you. Our children are the future of the church, but our children are the church today as well. See you next time.